Hi there, I want to talk to you about form, and for that reason I'm in my studio today. Form is a really important thing for us to understand in design. I actually learned last year that I kind of took it for granted. Formal elements we're going to talk about in the rest of the quarter, really, in the rest of the lesson. But form means the shape of the thing, the artwork you're talking about. So in my studio here, I have some artworks that are in the form of, I call this a bulb, kind of a rounded, irregular, asymmetrical form. The form is the same, this one and this one. They have the same form. The surface, the texture, the decoration, the subject, those are all different, but the form is the same. You could say that the form is a mug. The shape, the entire thing is in the, it's not shape, it's mass actually, because it has depth, but we sometimes we sometimes use the word shape and we know what we mean, but we don't really mean technically what we mean in design class. So the form of this, the thing that tells us about the whole thing, what it is that it's a mug. And because we say mug, we know it's going to have an inside, we know it's three-dimensional, we know it's going to have a handle. We don't necessarily know it's going to have a face. We don't know it'll be orange. Now both of these are in the form of a mug. We could also talk about this being a tall mug and this being a shorter mug. Or we could talk about this being a cylinder that is taller than it is wide, and this also being a cylinder, but a little bit shorter. We are in this class not going to have to get into all that because we're not dealing with real three dimensions. The form that we're talking about is form as in, forget the front, let's look at the back. The form of this artwork, even if you can't see it, you know that the form of this artwork is going to be a rectangle. It's a flat rectangle. Now, if I flip it over and I show you the artwork, you know the orientation as well. The letters tell you that, right? This artwork is not a tall portrait style rectangle. The form of this artwork is a horizontal landscape style or wide rectangle. It is wider than it is tall. Now, if I showed you the blank version, you would say it's a rectangle. That's all I know for sure. And you'd have to figure out which way it's oriented. And for example, something like this that's abstract could be oriented either way. The form could be a tall rectangle or a wide rectangle. But it's really important that you tell us that we know what we're talking about. Because if I show you this plan for an artwork, what I've got here has a tall, narrow rectangle. That is the form of the artwork. And that, in fact, ends up being different than the original from which it was traced, which is almost square. That means that the artwork itself, the design here, has more space on the edges in this one than it does in this one, because this one's tall and skinny and we kind of trim off the edges. When you are working on your own designs from scratch or from something else, it's important that you know orientation and the form. Rectangle, square, tall rectangle, wide rectangle. Maybe you want to start with a circle. That's called a tondo, if the artwork itself is in a flat circle. And of course you could get really wacky and have a really, really long rectangle. And of course this one happens to be in the form, besides being a rectangle, it happens to be in the form of a book jacket or a book cover. So when I talk to you in your sketchbooks about what is the form of this, I want to see a boundary. I want to see a box. And whether you make a box in your sketchbook for your sketches, whether you make it a rectangle or a square or a circle or a tall or a wide, all of those things matter. You can't just make your little subject floating in space. You've got to give us a sense of what the form is. And I'm going to push you on that on the sketches, and then I'm going to really bug you about that when you're doing your planning for your projects.